Well, I've got a lot to say, so I'm just going to get right to it. It was quite the mess of a day. I think the game is definitely heating up, to say the least. I do unfortunately have to drag my girl Azza for her emotional gameplay today, but before I do that, I want to do the full context from Azza's point of view because I feel like the sheep fan base just jump all over her per usual without seeing it from her point of view. It's funny, the fan base hates followers, follow the leader game, but that's exactly what people do on social media. And this fan base is follow everybody else and pile on. So this is Oz's point of view over the last 2 days, and also why Tiffany is being so fucking messy and stupid. Over the last 2 days, Oz has caught Tiffany in two, if not three lies. She's caught Tiffany in three lies because Tiffany has too much going on and she's lying to Ozza. She distanced herself from Ozza because of the whole Frenchie shit and the whole Joker's being a team shit. Firstly, a couple days ago, Ozza asked Tiffany after Derek X had told Ozza that her name was going around, and after Brittany told Ozza that Brent was bringing up Ozza's name, Ozza asked Tiffany about it, and Tiffany lied and said she hadn't heard anything. However, there was a later conversation that night between Tiffany, Ozza, and Brittany had told Tiffany earlier in the day about what Brent had been saying, even though Tiffany already knew. So when it got brought up again, Tiffany couldn't lie because Brittany was right there, so she knew that Tiffany knew that Brent had been saying Ozza's name. Today, Tiffany decides to lie again or miscommunicate, but it's probably a lie, and she's telling lies she doesn't need to be telling because she's playing like Frenchie if we're going to keep it 100. Tiffany then told Brittany and Ozza that Brittany and Tiffany need to target Derek X so he doesn't win today's safety, but during the challenge, it was Tiffany and Derek X actually targeting Brittany. So that was another lie. And Ozza is getting upset because people just aren't being real with her, which is the truth. And then when Ozza confronted Tiffany again about the stuff, Tiffany just lies to her again. So Ozza has every reason to be upset with players like Tiffany who are just telling lies just to tell lies and trying to gaslight Ozza. But Ozza's obviously seeing it, seeing through all the bullshit. But that brings me to Xavier's HOH today. After Tiffany won the wild card, she didn't take safety, whatever that meant, because it's yet another flop twist from production who just has a waste of time competitions on Sunday's episodes that just takes away time from actually telling stories. So Xavier wants to put, well, originally, and this is another thing Ozza caught on to, originally Xavier was going around on Thursday night saying he was going to nominate Brent and Whitney. But his plan had changed to nominating Brent and Brittany as a pawn. But the night before, after a conversation with Tiffany, Kylan, and Claire with Ozza, they were talking about how they thought that it should be possibly a pawn from the Jokers, that being Brittany, up against Brent. So then when that came to fruition today, it looks like, hey, Kylan, Claire, and Tiffany got in Xavier's head. So of course it looks like the Queens are in alliance. So Xavier, that is his plan today, even though people like Sarah Beth and Ozza and Brittany are just telling him just put up Brent and Whitney instead of causing more drama. But Xavier thinks that he can fool Brent that Brent is not the target against Brittany and that Brittany is actually the target. So Ozza, during this conversation with Xavier, definitely gets too emotional and does really dumb shit like saying she should go up on the block instead of Brittany. She doesn't want to deal with Brittany's emotions anymore. So Ozza thinks she would be the better pawn against Brent. But during that conversation, Ozza still had a point that Xavier is being afraid of Brent to not have Brent coming right after Xavier, and that the plan, the whole over the top scheme is stupid because Brent is going to realize that he's probably not the pawn. And so Xavier eventually has that conversation with Brent that he might put Brent up. And of course, Brent realizes he's not the pawn, he's probably the target because it's pretty obvious. So Xavier nominates Brent and Brittany. Brent already realizes he's the target. Of course, he's going to go for veto. Brittany, of course, upset, her usual crying over the top self. So Xavier did cause unnecessary drama during his HOH, definitely going back on his plan to lay under the radar. He should not want this HOH. And I do see from Xavier's game why he wouldn't want to put up Whitney, because they have a closer connection than Xavier and Brittany. So it makes sense for Xavier's game on one hand, but it still causes drama on Xavier's HOH that can turn the tide on Xavier, especially if Brent wins veto after all, and then Xavier still has to nominate Whitney. And then another thing that the fan base makes no sense on, they're always upset with Azza for trying to be close to the Joker's team, wondering, oh, why is she so worried about the Joker's team? And then after the veto meeting, every single different team is in a meeting together talking to themselves. So clearly it's not just Azza taking the team shit seriously. The best meeting, though, was between the aces with Hannah, Whitney, and Derek X continuing to just play Brent. Brent still thinks he has the numbers. He thinks even though this alliance with the Kings went bad with Xavier putting him up, he thinks he still has that mafia alliance between the aces and the queens. But I enjoyed watching Hannah and Whitney and Derek X just continue to play along that they're really with Brent, even though they all three hate him and want him out. Brent is so oblivious because of his ego. He thinks that Azza got in Xavier's head because he's so anti-Azza, because he's just dying to do the microaggressions against Azza, that Azza snapped at him about even though it was a simple conversation about floating. And even though Azza was volunteering to go on the block with Xavier. So Brent just continues to be a dumbass who is oblivious. Next in the night, we had Christian and Alyssa making out in the HOH bed under a cover. Xavier busts in on them, catching them in the act. But Xavier goes on to explain how he's seen Christian and Alyssa cuddle every night anyway. They really thought they were hiding it so well. I don't know how they thought that. They're both just dumb as rocks. But I mean, is Xavier really going from simp, as if that wasn't bad enough, to cuck? Because he's just so willing to put up with this showmance and his Kings team and his Kings alliance. I mean, I'm joking. I'm just being over the top like I like to be sometimes. But I have to believe that he sees that he can use this showmance in the future as a distraction so that people go after them. Because you cannot just attach yourself to a showmance, a third in a showmance. And I think Xavier proved today, by even though Azza being irrationally emotional of a player, that he is 100% committed to the cookout. I think Xavier is probably the most committed to the cookout. And I think that is where he is putting all his eggs in that cookout basket. But really, you would think it would be a matter of time before the showmance gets even caught on to even more. Whitney and Hannah have started to get close now that Hannah and Derek X actually realize that Whitney hates Brent. So that's an interesting thing. Whitney needs someone, and she's getting close to Hannah, which is an interesting combination. But they also then try to make a new alliance with the Queens, the Queens who are in 70 million alliances. So it's basically the Mafia without Brent. It would be the Queens and Aces minus Brent. I mean, it's really so crazy to me that this is just another fucking alliance for Tiffany, Claire, and Kylan, and that's not a good thing. Tiffany is getting upset that Azza's upset with her, and because Tiffany feels like she's too emotional, which is true, but Tiffany says they're playing two different games, and it's true because Azza's made two alliances. Tiffany's made, I've lost count, probably at least a dozen by now, and fucking so much. Neither of those things are really good. In fact, I would say Tiffany's is worse. Because what Tiffany doesn't realize, she said tonight about she this isn't big caring or something. This isn't big sister. This isn't big make friends. Uh, but she doesn't realize she's made all these fucking alliances that are probably not going to vote her to win when she has to break all these promises if she does make the end. Like, I'd really love someone to comment about just how many people were able to make this many promises, this many alliances, make it to the end and get the winning vote and not get the bitter vote. Game bots like Tiffany, and Tiffany's actually a hypocrite. She's not really a game bot. Tiffany is saying she doesn't like emotions in a game, but she's clearly upset that Ozza's being emotional. So that is an emotion to be upset and a bit pissy with Ozza. But despite Ozza being an emotional mess tonight, it seems like the queens are still more wary of Whitney to go soon, if not this week, if Brent takes himself off the block. And the problem with game bots is they don't take emotions into the game. These people are still humans. You're still playing a game with emotions. And unfortunate as we all might feel about it, jury management is a real thing that you got to deal with. People really thought Tashawn was going to lose BB Canada 9 because towards the end of that game, he started turning on people that he had aligned with late in the game. But otherwise, before that, Tashawn's social game was impeccable. And it's clear it was impeccable because he was never put on the block. So what Tiffany and Claire and maybe even Kylan are going to have to do is still play an impeccable social game while breaking all these promises. But you see, Tashawn did it so late in the game that it worked. But Tiffany and Claire and Kylan are going to have to start doing it from now. That is so bad. That is a very hard thing to accomplish. And Tiffany's already getting sloppy with all her lying for no reason. And one other thing that pissed me off. I might be a little on one. It's been a few days since I've been on one, so cut me some slack. I don't like Kylan being upset with Ozza being emotional because Kylan is the same crybaby bitch who in the first week was crying when he was nominated, who was becoming a paranoid mess that week. And it was Ozza who tried to calm him down about being so paranoid. And Kylan couldn't even save himself on the fucking block. It had to be the real man in the house, who is fucking Derek X, to save Kylan. So Kylan can take several fucking seats in acting that Ozza's being too emotional when he did the exact same thing just a week and a half ago, being a paranoid crybaby. And the only reason Kylan is doing so good, spoiler alert, later in the day when our rankings air, Kylan is very high in our rankings. But Kylan is only high in our rankings because everybody is babying him. And that is working for him very well. But he's still a messy bitch. I don't really know what else to talk about. I guess we'll just end it with Ozza and Derek X also having problems because Ozza feels like Derek X also lied to her today about the whole Derek X is going to throw it because Tiffany and Brittany are going to take him out first. But the opposite happened, and it was Tiffany and Derek X taking out Brittany first. And yes, unfortunately, Oz is being way too emotional with Derek X. But Derek X better do whatever he can to fix the situation. Because honestly, Derek X cannot take losing Ozza in this game. I think Ozza is a very important piece for Derek X's puzzle if he's actually going to win this game. So whether it's losing her as an ally or losing her early in the game, which could be happening because she's so fucking emotional of a player right now. Derek X can't let any of that happen. He is going to need an Ozza late in the game. Maybe not even late in the game, maybe even early jury or mid jury. He's going to need an Ozza in the game that has his back. And one last thing about Tiffany. Tiffany gave this great advice to Derek X to stop talking so much. And since then, all she's done for the last 7 days is talk too much. Just want to point that out for everybody who still thinks Tiffany's playing the best game. I thought for the first 10 days, Tiffany was going to do so well. She had such good reads. But for the past week, we need everybody to come back down to reality. Tiffany is not playing a winning game right now. At best, she's playing a second place game for a bitter jury loss. And at worst, it's all going to blow up in her face in the next 3 to 4 weeks when she can't keep up with these dozen alliances that she has formed.